I remember that year quite well, 2011. One day we just looked over the hill and saw a big plume of smoke coming out of here. I remember when it came down into the canyon, the crew being from Santa Clara, the emotion that we felt when we got up here, the devastation that we saw was almost unbearable. Being a project manager and looking at that, I can remember thinking to myself, well, what are we going to do? Several weeks afterwards, we kind of transitioned over and started doing some of the burned area restoration work. We were prepping these 4 ponds. At that time, Governor Chavarria, he was the forestry director, and he came up, and me and him were talking there, and I had this little radio that I was listening to. The warning system went off on it, and we both looked up back here in these hills. The clouds were really dark. From there, it was just spectacular to see some of the damage from all the water coming down. I mean, to me, it was phenomenal. Something I'd never seen before. And soon after the fire and after the flood, you come to that point where it almost seems hopeless. If you looked at the jumbled mess, it was like, okay, where do we start? We start with one branch at a time. And that's exactly what we did. Started cutting up everything, moving it hand by hand. Governor Chavarria came up and he looked and he goes, "What are you doing?" I told him, "What you told me to do? You told me to remove this stuff, and that's exactly what I'm doing." He was like, "You need heavy equipment." I said, I understand that, but I don't have heavy equipment. All I have are 20 guys, a piece of rope, and some fire equipment. And I said, that's where I got to start. And we started realizing at that point, well, what do we need? How do we get it? How do we obtain it? Looking at short-term goals, mid-term goals, and long-term goals, putting the pieces of the puzzle together. Mr. Chavarria, the director at that time, started bringing those resources together, the other agencies developing that plan. And that was very critical at that point because I was also a part of those meetings. I was also meeting with the Bureau of Indian Affairs, the engineers, in Corps of Engineers, and they started realizing, they asking me as a project manager, what do you need? What type of resources do you need? And I said, no, number one, I need heavy equipment resources. Then we can start looking at salvage logging and how can we save some of this wood? Well, how can we also utilize some of that wood to start putting in some structures? Being indigenous to the area and knowing that's how our people maintain themselves, was tying in those resources that we have here rather than putting a big thing of cement out there that's unnatural to the area. I'm blessed to be a part of putting this back, and how we actually got to this point, is amazing to me, and definitely a story that should be told and shared with other folks.